The first technique that was used was with colored flashcards, just squares of color. And I used that for several months, and I came to the second major technique, which is projecting music. And what you're doing is, this is the technique that's carried me over the last 20 or so years as this thing has evolved. What you're doing is you want to project color. You want to take music as you're listening to it and to project a light show, which is translucent colors, forms, volumes of colors, just like you see here. They can be of any arbitrary shape. What you use basically is different colors for these, say for the lower tones. You'll use darker colors, maybe brassy tones for brassy parts of the orchestra, and lighter colors, blues and yellows, and lighter, brighter colors for the higher notes. And what set this off was, in reading about Van Gogh, I came to the point where in one of the biographies it was related that he played a note on a church organ, and he thought that that would correspond to a certain color, that note. And it's something that musicians do quite frequently, is they visualize structures of sound, music, as color forms. And this is all that you're doing. And the basic rule is that they have to be translucent. You can't create opaque colors in the dream state, just as you can't easily see or produce translucent colors in the physical reality. It can be done, but you have to engineer it. And this is what caused me trouble with, for example, Raphael and other of the high Renaissance classical masters. It's the colors they were introducing and the way that they were introducing it, as opposed to the colors that, say, the post-impressionists use, and the way that they used it, completely inconsistent. And trying to work out those differences is what led me to develop this whole thing about the difference between the dream state conscious and the waking state conscious, and how they are both used visually in the production and use of colors in the history of painting specifically, as running from Raphael, Michelangelo, Leonardo to Cézanne, Van Gogh, and then a lot of the painters that came just after them, modern art. And so this is it, arbitrary forms arranged in arbitrary arrangements, but just with the differences in colors and structures that you want to learn to produce as light shows to music. And you put them up, you project them either in the waking state, equally well in the dream state. And in both cases here, it uses a combination of the subconscious and the conscious mechanisms. So you have to draw the subconscious. The subconscious naturally, as it happened, just developed with this and developed with me, the conscious state. And none of it was ever based on, anything that happened was never based on any theory or formalization, psychology, like psychology or any real science. It's just taking what you see and trying to understand it. And that's the motivation for both myself and the subconscious. Okay, so what I want to do now is give you just some idea of what that actually means to project those kind of visuals. As it turns out, I said before, what you're doing in generating the machine itself, and that's what these are. This is a machine. To test the nature of the space itself, and also the workings, where it is placed in the psychic, and as a part of your own internal anatomy, how that part of it works. And all you do is just produce the machine, and see how it works, how you can put them up different ways. And this is one way. It's just the structure of the music itself is the entirety of the machine itself. That's the purest form. And no connections to any considerations or any what you call context. You just put it up. Now, ideally, once you get very practiced with this, the subconscious can put up an entire machine on its own. And really all the conscious mind has to do is just observe it. And there it takes the appearance of the music itself is producing the machine. You're not conscious of any aspect of it doing it. More normally, the conscious mind will decide what parameters it wants to use to orient the machine, and what the context of that machine will be to, say, the space around it, or the viewer, or the way that the machine is put up. And so you have darker for bases and larger structures, and then lighter forms for just minor melodies. And there's a sense, part of what you're trying to get is in the body of music itself. What are the structures that support and relate all the different parts of the music, the different sections, say if it's in an orchestra, and you just put them up directly and see, you can use arbitrary colors, or you might have favorite colors for certain instrumental groups of instruments. And the way that it fits together can be either directly through a melodic line, a progression in some part of the overall structure, or the structure can just be of the relation of the parts spatially to the rest, either the whole of the geometry or the whole of the structure of the machine. And that's where the really curious and the sort of nuanced elements of it is. Okay, so that's one way. It's just the purest view is just to put the music up. Let the subconscious put it up, or you put it up as directly as you can. Common use, as it turns out, is to use it just as a geometry, in the same way that you traipse about the physical geometry of the landscape. You can create a landscape of the music. Here in this is an example. This surface here is water, more or less. It functions like a surface of a body of water. And then you have these different elements that are independent components of melody that occur in different places or within different instrumental groups, and they just appear as forms of themselves. And then you have in the far background, you have, say, a far shore and maybe some arbitrary buildings. It can be any form of, it's like a gaming geometry that your computer builds for you to play games in. You can build it out of any different elements that you want and project it. Everything is projected from the music, projected however you want, the color forms. That's one. Another way is if the music is a kind of piece that seeks out its own closed machine. In other words, it'll run through trajectories that traverse, say, a solid sphere. And this is something that Elton John, most of the music I use are like classical rock and roll. Most especially Dire Straits. This is out of Dire Straits, and Elton John is another good one. And this is the sort of structure that Saturday Night's All Right likes to build. And this is the type of structure that Sultans of Swing likes to build. That's how you build them, however, it's entirely between yourself and the subconscious how you're going to proceed with this. I guess I should mention that this didn't happen like over 2 or 3 months. One incident after another. It occurred over a period of some 20 years, 20 years more now, just as a natural unfolding of events. And this is a particular case where the geometry is, and this is this is after the Elvis song, by Dire Straits, and the music produces the action of a forceful dynamic, a function of, say, this works something like ice skating or maybe just rollerblading down a road, and the music, the percussion, say the beat, you're going to take a step on the skates for every beat, which means you're going to be skating a lot faster than you actually physically can if you're really skating. So it is kind of hyper-real or surreal there, but you can do it. And as you go along, the music itself is what forces you. The surface that you're skating on becomes like a frictionless surface, and it's just the beat is forcing you with every step forward, and at the same time, when your foot hits the surface, the friction forces out geometries of color, which then become the surrounding environment. So you're creating your geometry spontaneously as you're moving, the movement itself, and it's like just like skating. The movement itself generates, the music generates the movement, and the movement generates also the music, which is the geometry of your environment. So it's kind of like you're skating through a very large tunnel that your motion is creating as you go along. And so it runs the length of the whole movement. And so those are several ways that you can use it. There are an arbitrary number of ways that you can. In this case, you're sort of writing the geometry. You can also build just a regular spatial geometry. Back to another one. You can place yourself someplace on the machine here, say on an arbitrary surface or something, and then you can allow the music. You can allow the music to force the geometry itself to expand and contract and push you, maybe to elevate you to great altitudes or drop you down. It's kind of like sailing. And it's in the same context as this. Rocket Man, Elton John's Rocket Man is a good example of using that. And the music is designed for that sort of effect. And you can then use that. I should also say that all of these are for only work in the Minkowski space, the first kind of space, the ethereal space of Van Gogh and Lawrence Maxwell and all that. The geometry of the second space, which is, now I showed and I've already mentioned how the ethereal space is projected from the head, and the astral type space is projected from the upper chest. And there's a problem that now when that happened, and I only ran into the astral space about 3 years ago, when that happened, the subconscious stayed with the astral space projections because it didn't want to confuse the two. But now I'm finding, as I'm going back and trying to remember how this was done, and I try to actually project them, I find that I cannot use just the ethereal space anymore. I have to use the astral space. And it doesn't work like as simply as just that the M4 is like a very large, you can look at it either way, a very large free-space, ordinary E3 Euclidean geometry, in which is embedded four spaces, where time is the time it has kind of odd ways of translating between two distinct points in the space. Or it can be the other way around, that it's a very large four space, with Euclidean, local Euclidean spaces, and this is really more like it. For example, the Earth is a sphere, but it's locally flat because at a small scale it supports flat geometries, like the geometries that build architecture or roads or bridges and that sort of thing. Same way, space is a giant space-time construct, but locally you have embedded Euclidean spaces. And you run into some really interesting considerations on things like the independence of three independent basis vectors to create the space. If you're running a very large machine that's running say an x component of a vector of a velocity here and up here, and it does such in such a way that these two are then independent, then those two basis vectors are not necessarily the same Euclidean basis vector for the space. So you might have more than one Euclidean frame involved. You might have actually two Euclidean frames involved, which is actually a 6 space rather than a 3 space. All kind of interesting problems like that. So what I now have to do, I'm having to try to learn how to paint watercolor on whiteboard to start with, and try to give some idea of what I actually want to convey to you. But I'm also going to have to try to find a way to invent for the representation, the pictorial representation on the whiteboard, different kinds of geometries that do not exist in our ordinary 3 space or in our ordinary experience. So that's an interesting problem of itself. That's one of these. A lot of these pictures look pretty crappy. I've got a long way to go before I learn how to use this medium and paint any kind of acceptable picture. So I hope y'all would bear with me. And that's it for today. I want to go in as soon as possible into some of these geometries in the actual space. I've already mentioned in a video about results that I got some indication of what's going to be there. So that's it for now. Thank you.